Right, we're moving on to our second topic of the day. So before I do that, I should make sure we just remind everyone who these other guys are on the A.D.K channel. Of course, Dave from Lowdown, and of course, Alan from Before the Sirens. Okay, the next question is, was nu metal as bad as everyone says it was, and why does it have that reputation? So this has come up quite a lot because obviously every time we talk about nu metal or some sort of nu metal riff comes up on it, Kirk loses his shit basically and says how much he hates it. And I liked nu metal when it came out. But it became kind of a joke thing about, oh my god, it's so bad. Limp Bizkit, nu metal, it's just awful. But was it actually that bad? Anyone got any particular thoughts on this? Want to kick this off?
I'm quite happy to jump in if you want.
Go for it.
So, because I had a decent thought about this and ended up listening to a load of it myself because it reminds me of being like a teenager, right? But not all of it, and I'll come to that in a sec. So, in the same way that if you consider any sort of what would be deemed to be a faddy sort of genre of music, i.e. a genre of music that had its time and went, there's something about it. It taps into, a sociological kind of thinking at the time. Seemed to be a lot of kind of angst knocking around in music in general. And it was that sort of, it was almost like the sort of anti-standard kind of metal. It was completely anti, your generic, not generic, that's not the right word, your sort of stereotypical metal stereotypes, as I say. But basically, you usually had a bunch of guys stood on stage all in black, headbanging and playing really fast, really heavy stuff, and then you got the likes of Limp Bizkit, like you say, that turned up in backwards baseball caps and face paint, and yeah, they're still by their own rights heavy, but it was a change. Now, the reason I say that it had its place is that it's a bit like something. I'm sure we all had something that we wore when we were younger, and we were like, "I look wicked," and then you look back at a picture of yourself and go, "I look like a twat." Right? That's what nu metal is.
Yeah.
Right? Nu metal is where it had its time, but the people playing it, obviously in their 20s, 30s at that time, 20, 30 years later, it doesn't age well. It doesn't wear well over time. So it's not something that you can keep repeating because it ages. And then the problem was that in the same way as all these kind of genres that pop up and then disappear, you get a sort of saturation of it. So the sort of bad ones almost become popular by proxy, and so therefore that kind of reinforces the impression that it's just awful, because ultimately there are some really, really good ones that were around in and around its sort of heyday, but by the end of it, it was just regurgitations of the same old stereotypes, the same old riffs, the same old looks, the same old attitudes, the same old, rap metal singing about how much he hates his dad, that kind of vibe. And it becomes samey. And then everybody jumps on the bandwagon and goes, that's crap. Right, it's crap. And that was crap. And it was always crap. And it just becomes... So, in essence, do I think it's as bad as everybody says it was? No, there are probably... an album's worth of songs from different bands that I would go back to and go, oh yeah, that was a tune, I like that. But why does it have a bad reputation? Because it didn't wear well. It's like that really cool t-shirt you had when you were a kid and you thought you looked wicked and you didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't.
Okay. Anyone else got any viewpoints on this they want to chip in at this point?
Yeah, I think I think with nu metal specifically, I think the reason everyone thinks that it was so bad is because it defined a generation of wankers. Let's face it.
That's not bad.
Everyone that was growing up at that time, they're a bit divvy. Do you know what I mean? They're a bit like, just not quite with it. And I'm part of that generation. I do think that me growing up around about that time, perfect example is from Woodstock '99. Tried to replicate free love, and he was an absolute fucking idiot to think he could do that. Personally speaking, just my opinion. But no one wanted that at the time because you had bands exactly like Alan pointed out, Limp Bizkit, which were making everyone full of angst. Oh, everyone, the world hates you. You are owed this. You know, fuck the world. Middle fingers were up everywhere. So how on earth are you going to look back on angsty times and be like, yeah, that was awesome? Because it probably wasn't as we were growing up. But I do think in the same breath that I really liked Chocolate Starfish and Hot Dog Flavored Water. Like, one album. That was awesome because it was different. You know, they got onto the mainstream public eye and it was just awesome. I thought it was really good. And I've revisited that recently. Pardon me. And yeah, I think that's really good. But then you've got other bands like Linkin Park. They were just... Well, I don't think they were created out of necessity, but obviously there was an empty vessel of music and they kind of joined in with that. And they defined, even now, they defined that sort of like almost subgenre of like new metal and stuff. And I don't think that there were bands that should have been in the new metal sort of like wave. I don't think Deftones should have been classed as new metal. But for some reason they get put in with that. So I just think it was down to, at that point, the world was in a certain stasis and that new metal was the soundtrack to that time. So I think if everyone was to look back at that, you know, like we all did, like Alan said, you know, wearing a flame shirt thinking, yeah, look at me, mum. I'm wicked.
You're looking good.
You're still wearing a flame shirt, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Before I go to Kirk, because I know Kirk's going to have plenty to say on this, I want to throw over to Andy, because Andy, you do like a new metal band.
Yeah, I do. If the class is that.
From that genre.
Aside from Stained, my new metal experience, it really relies on the ones that were on the old sort of video channels back in the day. So you like your Linkin Parks, Limp Bizkit. I've got Chocolate Starfish. I think it's a great album. But you know, the other sort of main big hitters like Deftones and the like, I've never really heard of, to be honest. So yes, absolutely love Stained. I think they do fall into that new metal group. And I agree with Dave and Alan. It does place us in a certain time frame. You know, sort of the 90s, early 2000s. It's that period of time in music, and it's sort of just lives there really. And is it as bad as people make out? No, it isn't, because I liked a few tracks, a few albums, a few bands, you know, and it's a scene that people did like and was very popular. So it doesn't deserve the sort of bad rap that it sometimes gets. There were some absolute bangers coming from that time.
Okay.
Especially Stained.
Go on, Kirk. I know you've got a few viewpoints on this.
Yeah, I should start with the positives then. If everyone's expecting me to just rail against new metal and say it was an aberration, the origins of new metal, I love all those bands. Faith No More, Primus, Helmet, Rage Against the Machine, even early Red Hot Chili Peppers. These are top quality bands that we would have called alternative at the time. You're right, Dave. There was no such thing as alternative metal. The origins, again, to me, new metal is Korn. That first album is one of the best albums of all time. I think there's probably a consensus on that. That changed music. It didn't just change rock and metal. You've got 5 dudes from LA, white, dreadlocks, dressed in Adidas tracksuits, playing 7-string guitars, bagpipes, and you've got a singer who's had a fucked up childhood and has a song called Daddy at the end of that album where he has this spontaneous out-of-body moment where he relives the trauma of being sexually abused. I don't think anyone had ever heard anything like it. It's one of the darkest albums ever produced. Now, the irony with new metal is Korn, who created this new sound, which should have gone on, it did go on, didn't it, commercially to become a juggernaut, but it could have been better. And they are the reason, I think, why it went backwards with that 1998 album, Follow the Leader, which is utter shite.
No, and it's a great album. You're
They
talking
just
out your
turned
arse.
into a parody of themselves, right? And then every other new metal band, they weren't influenced by the first Korn album. They were influenced by that Follow the Leader album. Have you heard that song, Children of the Corn, where Jonathan Davis and Fred Durst are rapping? It's the most embarrassing thing I've ever heard in my life. Cold Chamber. Oh, awful band. Do me a favor, go and read the lyrics to the song Big Truck from their debut 1996 album. Jesus Christ, that is the most infantile, stupid thing I've ever heard in my life. The other thing, no technical ability on the guitars, but I do understand that. And there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from hip hop, as they were doing, and other genres. You know, there was even a bit of industrial in there, wasn't there, in the second wave of new metal. But the thing that really turned me off it, you had all these bands coming along, they were influenced by Korn, and I got the impression they were making up stories about their childhood. Oh, I had a shit childhood, so I'm going to have to write songs about this. It's like, did you? You know, Jonathan Davis clearly has gone through a lot of shit. And you only have to listen to the last two albums. His wife died, didn't she? 3 years ago. And again, you put that on, you're like, Jesus Christ, this is intense music. But I think the bands they influenced were so shit. It just, as Alan said, it puts you off, and it shouldn't be like that. And my final point, and I'm going to throw it back at the end as a question to you guys. New metal just became an American genre that conquered the world. Can you tell me any good new metal bands outside of the United States? In fact, can you tell me a new metal band from New York? This was all coming from Los Angeles, really, wasn't it? Even the image of it, you know, skater shorts, dreadlocks. How the fuck could I relate to that growing up in Northwest England, Lancashire?
See, you never listened to 1 Minute Silence from the UK. Great new metal
They
band.
weren't bad. They weren't bad, you know. Who were the other bands? Earthtone 9, they weren't at that level, were they? You couldn't put them next to Korn. You're right, Dave. Deftones clearly have done well, outlived that. You could even say they've almost turned into like a post-metal band. I don't even know where they are now. They're really influential. They're a great band, aren't they? Even bands like Disturbed, to be fair, have done well to emancipate beyond new metal. And you've had examples of bands who came in towards the end but still managed to get out and go forward. Chimera being a good example. No one remembers that they were playing new metal because they were such an excellent groove metal band. And Des Fafora, Devil Driver, good metal band to me. You wouldn't think that was the guy from Cold Chamber, but yeah, too Americanized. When you've got indie bands like Ben Folds 5 taking the piss out of Korn in their MTV videos, you know something's wrong. And then finally, when you've got members of the Backstreet Boys saying, oh, we want to do a side project, it probably is going to sound like Korn and Limp Bizkit. That's when you know that a genre has really fucking reached saturation point. So
I'll add just one last point, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago in one of our reaction videos. It bred this necessity for a superfluous band member, and it drove me crackers. Where you had one band member who was only there as almost like a hype man. He was like, he didn't do anything, but he was just there to go nuts, and it drove me to distraction. And I only remembered how annoyed I was about it when we did that reaction video the other day where the bloke was playing, and I quote this, a table. His instrument was a table, and it drove me mad. I was like, that is a waste of space, oxygen, energy, and everything else you're doing. But yes, anyway, that was my fight. You just reminded me of that, Kirk.
Okay.
So,
I'd like a hype man.
a hype
You
man.
want a hype man.
I'll be your hype man, Dave.
Wait, you can just shout Dave and hit the table.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up as far as my thoughts on it. So I think with the fact of new metal, as you said, like Korn came out in like 93. So you're talking like 94, 95 was the kind of the big launch of new metal.
it was
And
exciting.
we had about 5 years where we had quality new metal coming out. And I think the big change was 1999 Slipknot's debut album hitting. That upped the game, and that showed that actually the quality of what you do with new metal could be taken to another level. The problem we then had was turn of the century 2000. We had the guys that were listening to new metal at 95 had decided they wanted to be in bands and realized that new metal was basically just big power chords and not a lot else. and it was easy to do it was easier to become a new metal band than it was to become a classic metal band or a thrash band, or so let's be a new metal band. And then we got bands in 2000 called Crazy Town with their song Butterfly, and that killed new metal. That's it. That's the point that new metal died.
Have you seen them recently? They fought each other and they've been thrown off of the Head PE tour because the two singers were caught backstage beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's all on video.
So that's where I worked out. That was it. 1999 Slipknot album, 2000 Crazy Town. That's what killed new metal, and that's why.
Come, my lady, you're my butterfly, sugar, baby.
There you go.
We can other music, by the way. Other than that,
Did they do any?
That's it. They just come out
with
with
as
one
bad
song.
as you would expect it to be.
They offended people by doing a cover of that. You know, a lot of people really love that Swedish hardcore band Refused. Puritans were like, Crazy Town, they're not allowed to cover good music. You're like really offended by it. It's like, calm down.
So there we have our thoughts on new metal. There we go. That was interesting, I think.